My name is Keith Whalen from RPI. Hot off the oven. This is the first time we're going to debut adding fireworks to your requisition approval. We have two great presenters with us here today, Mr. Richard Stout and Ms. Stephanie Kowal. Mrs. Stephanie Kowal.
Thanks Keith. This is going to be, this should be a pretty exciting end to our webinar block party today. We're going to talk about spicing up your requisitioning process. What can you do to take advantage of some new technology, some new features that are out there to come back. A lot of organizations have had requisition approval for a number of years, and it probably hasn't changed much since it was first implemented, but the tools available to us now, when we do rec approval implementations today, they look vastly different than how they looked 4 or 5 or 8 years ago. So we're hoping to share some of the tips and techniques that we're using today for those of you that are thinking about rolling out requisition approval, but maybe more so for those of you that have been live on requisition approval for a while and might want to look at ways to bring in some of these new features and enhance that process. So our simple basic email notifications making your approvers sad. do you long for more information in your approval emails? Do you long for a more modern, clean look and feel to your approval email notifications?
We have the answer. Here we can create some beautiful approval emails. Gives you lots of informative information about the requester, who they're ordering for, what the account unit name is, any kind of item information. You can bring in that GL detail and make those connections, and also give some very rich approval message history to let other approvers know what's going on with that requisition.
And all of that leads up to one of the greatest new features in IPA, something that customers have been asking for a long time, email approval. The ability for an approver to avoid the in-basket altogether, simply click a link at the bottom of the email and approve the rec. And of course, that's empowered by a really rich email notification that brings all the information to the approver they need to make a decision. And turning on email approval is actually pretty easy for your Flow developer. It's simply checking a box when you're editing your user action node on the Notify tab. It's pretty easy to turn on. So some considerations when looking to roll out approve via email functionality. The main question that people ask is, what if the approver forwards the email? Then what happens? Can the person they forwarded to click the approve link? Can that person approve? Do we want them to approve? Do we not want them to approve? So the simple answer is yeah, out of the box. If I'm an approver, I receive an email that has an approved link and I forward to someone else, if that other person clicks the link, that rec is going to be approved. Now, there are some options to control that. You can turn on an authentication requirement that makes you log in if you're not already logged in when you click that link. And then within the flow itself, the user action node is able to collect both the username of the person the notification was sent to, as well as the username of the person who actually clicked the approved link. So within your flow logic as a developer, you can handle that. You can compare that. You could do some queries on once you found out which user actually did click the approved link. you can do some queries and validate that that person is or maybe is not does not have the approval authority needed, and then you can handle that within the flow. Another thing to keep in mind is that approve link basically is a link back to your landmark server. So the person clicking the approve link needs network connectivity to the landmark server. So if they're at home, if they're on their iPhone, they might find that link doesn't route through the firewall or isn't available on the network that they're on. So it works best when the person is sitting at their desk, accessing their email there. There are some things you can do to make that available, to a wider base, but it requires some it requires a more complicated networking infrastructure and potentially external web server. So.
Great, so enhancing the requester experience. So the really cool thing that a lot of people forget about is requisition status, and I talk about this a lot in the RQC Best Practices webinar. In requisition status, on the right-hand side, there's some detail about the requisition itself, the item detail tab, but there's also a stack of boxes, which is the org chart. So if you hover your mouse over it, it will actually let you know approval information. So here the level 1 approval happened. Stephanie Kowal was the approver, and it shows the date that I approved it at. And it will show me that the level 2 is pending. Unfortunately, it does not let me know the name of that approver.
But this isn't a customization. This is built right into RQC, right?
Exactly.
So
Very
this is
easy.
probably a feature you have available today. Might just not know it's there.
Yes. So we found a lot of different customers have requisition status, but actually have the link hidden within the RQC Requisition Center bookmark. So you can work with your portal administrator to get that configured and start testing it out. Very exciting. So there's some additional things that add to the requester experience. And that's delivering actionable information. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. So we spoke a little bit earlier about email approval notifications for the approver. Well, what about the requester? So here you can layer in every time the requisition gets approved, it's going to alert the requester so they know that it's along the path. There's also smart notifications that you can build if you have LBI to notify the user of that as well.
Yeah. I like smart notifications for this purpose because if you build a lot of email notifications in your flow, that's great, but those email notifications are all going to be specific to one particular requisition. And if you're doing a lot of requisitions, that's just going to really increase the number of emails that are coming out of flow. And they're also going to be pretty much consistent for everyone involved in the process, which is great, except some people might prefer more notification than other. And with smart notifications, you can create a notification that looks at all of the requisitions for that a particular person may be interested in, and summarize all that information together. And users can easily subscribe and unsubscribe to smart notifications. So those that are interested in that information can subscribe to it, and those that prefer to keep a clean inbox can unsubscribe.
Absolutely. Then there's also crystal reports that you can post to your dashboard. So just some examples here, number of requisitions processed, how many are waiting for approval, where those items are at. So here it's showing the requisition work unit history and all of the requisitions that are actually waiting for approval. And it will also show whether or not those requisitions have timed out waiting for that approver.
All right, exception management, the art of detecting issues before they happen and rerouting around those issues to keep your journey on track. This is a big one. You know, we've gotten a lot of experience working with requisition approval on both sides, the developer side as well as the procurement side, and we've seen a lot of different kinds of problems that come up in the requisitioning process. So what we like to do is take some of those more common problems and figure out how we can build that logic right within the rec approval flow to anticipate those issues and maybe even correct them, maybe even on the fly, so they never become issues at all. And one great example for that is security. You know, approvers need to have certain security within Lawson in order to do their approvals. On the RM record, you need WF user equals 1. They're going to need to have the right role that allows them to view the requisition as well as access into the Logan database. And when we move over from process flow to IPA, that becomes even more complicated because now there's a landmark role that they're going to need. They need to be defined as an IPA user. That's a lot of different checkpoints that each approver needs to meet if they're going to have a frustration-free approval process. Build all those checks into your flow, in your rec approval flow. And if you find that a designated approver does not meet all of the security criteria, right within the flow itself, you can add the roles that they need. You can add the WF user 1 attribute. You can build the IPA user profile definition record right on the fly. So by the time the approver gets that email notification or goes into the in basket, all of their user security has been corrected, so they're going to have everything they need, and they won't run into any security exceptions.
And also adding to that, it could be that the user doesn't exist, so you want it to skip to the next level, and then also notify someone so that they can start to do some research to see if something's missing within the hierarchy. So you also can plan for that to notify the right user so that they can investigate and correct it for the next work unit.
I like to build into my rec approval flows a special in-basket for the person that's managing the requisitioning process. And if an exception occurs during the approval, and we really need a person to look into that and maybe make some configuration changes, I like to park that rec in an in-basket so we can keep track of those. It also means the flow doesn't need to terminate. You don't need to go back into RQ13 and approve the rec manually. You'll give your administrator of requisitions some options from that in-basket, and one of them is restart the approval process after they've had a chance to go and make the corrections that they need. Here's an example of the work unit screen. We're looking at landmark IPA administration. Our goal as process designers is to minimize the amount of times that you need to come into this screen and troubleshoot a problem and figure out what's going on, because it can be it's difficult and time consuming to have to read through work unit logs every time a rec has failed to finish approval. So that's what we're looking out for and trying to anticipate those common scenarios and build our flow to route around them.
Absolutely, and it can be difficult to poke through this a lot, so by using that in-basket option to help handle those exceptions, you can kind of step away from the rich client in some instances and improve that process for whoever's correcting those errors as well.
Hey, we got a question.
Yeah.
Can the requisition status bookmark be limited to a user's request or value?
Absolutely. There's security behind each of those bookmarks. So whoever's a portal administrator can actually go into bookmark management, select that link, and then put the requester IDs. You also can do it by group.
Yeah, and it will only show you status on recs that you're involved in, right?
No, we'll show you everything.
You can see any requisition
Yes.
in any status.
Yes.
Okay.
It defaults to your own requester ID, and a user can override that. Of course, you could build security behind only allowing them to see their own requisitions. But in most organizations, there's not that much of a risk there, unless your requester, for some reason you've implemented that a sales rep has access to enter requisitions. In those instances, you would definitely want some security so they can't go in and look at your pricing. But we found most people that utilize requisition status, being able to see each other's requisitions has not been a high risk. It's more of a enhancement, a benefit to the requesters to improve that relationship between them and purchasing.
Okay, I recognize some of the attendees that are on this. We have some fairly advanced organizations with requisitions and rec approvals, so we should have some interesting questions coming on.
Awesome, keep it coming. Proxy approvers. This topic we touched on a little bit earlier today on our 10 favorite things about 10. Hey, have you ever gone into the new IPA in basket and noticed there's now an option for my proxies over on the right? Let's take a look at what happens when we click on my proxies. That brings you to a screen where, as an approver, you could designate other users to handle your approval tasks. You can do that on a task-by-task basis. You can do that for certain time periods. So if I'm going to be out of the office for a while, I'm going to go into this screen and designate someone on my team during that time period to have the ability to come in and do approvals for me. Of course, there are some considerations when looking at rolling out proxy approvers. This isn't available to just anyone in the system unless they have the security class granted that they need. That's Process Automation Proxy ST. Now, a question that came up earlier today is, can I designate anyone in my organization as an approver? Or can it be limited to only individuals that truly have the authority to approve this requisition? Well, the system isn't going to stop me from assigning any user who has a user profile definition record in IPA as my proxy. But as a flow developer, you're going to have that data available. Similar to forwarding an email notification, the user action node in your flow is going to provide you with the username of the person who performed that approval. It's up to you as the flow developer to validate that person meets the business requirements for approval. And if they do not, you can handle that by rerouting that rec to someone else who needs to see it.
I got more.
All right.
So, a comment. Strange that requisition status allows access to all requesters, yet ordering is limited to just one requester.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think it's really to give visibility department-wide. If you're in the inquiry area of RQC shopping, you only can see your own, and that doesn't really help you communicate if you have another requester in your department and they're out of the office, but you wanted to see if they had an order open. You wouldn't be able to see that with RQC shopping under inquiry, and maybe you would use something like RQ44 if they left you a trail, but I think it really gives departments more visibility to that detail.
Which version is your sandbox?
Where it's a fairly recent vintage of Landmark 10.1.1. So we're in the 30s, 10.1.1.30 something.
We assign rec approval by rec location tasks. Will proxies work? Example, user A has task level 1 category, rec location 123. User B has task level 1, rec location 234. Can user A assign a new category to user B?
Sort of. So it's not the same, right? A train leaves Chicago at 3 p.m. It's not quite the same as adding another user task category record. Setting up a proxy means that any new work units that are coming in to the primary approver also get rerouted over to my proxy during that specified time period. That also means that if my approver goes on vacation with 20 things in the in basket, proxy functionality isn't going to send all of those existing items that have been waiting out there to my proxy.
I got a couple more and then we'll take a break and let you keep going, but we might as well take the comments when they come in.
Yeah.
We use and love rec status.
Yeah.
Managers to see what happened to their users' orders. So,
Good.
1.4. On the in-basket screen, do you know how to automatically process the notification? Upper right-hand corner as red, so users are not annoyed by constantly having to go in and mark as red?
Oh, the notifications.
Yeah, that's that is definitely a feature that not everyone is happy about. I've seen that hidden with configuration console, so it's just invisible. I haven't tried automatically marking it as red, but that's a good idea. Now that you bring it up, I think that we could probably do that with a landmark transaction node after the user action.
Okay, one last question for this round and a cool one. My experience with the email notification approval actions is that if the email is forwarded to another user, the approval is done under the person who forwarded the email, not the person who clicked the link. Mm-hmm. So how can it get validated in the flow since the person forwarding the email is the valid approver?
Yeah, because there are two outputs from the user action node. There's the action user, and then there's the auth action user. And in earlier versions of Landmark, it didn't really do a good job of tracking who the real person who really clicked the link was. Now, keep in mind, in order to track that, you do need to turn on authentication for email approval. So out of the box, it doesn't enforce that you're logged into Lawson when you click that approve link. So that's an option that needs to be turned on. It's done by creating a property in the system configuration and then restarting Landmark for that change to take effect. So once you've got it that it's enforcing that users are logged into Lawson in order to do that approval, at that point the Landmark system should be able to know who was logged in when they clicked the link. And in Landmark 10.0, 10.1.0, even early versions of 10.1.1, that didn't really work. It only recorded the user ID of the person the notification was sent to. But I'm happy to report that we tested this out on our internal IPA sandbox and proved that it is working in the current version of Landmark. It truly does keep track of both users separately. And not only can you get that back as variables out of the user action node, it shows when you go into the work unit screen, bring up the work unit, click into the user actions tab, and then bring up your user action and look at routing. It's going to show the user both usernames there, who it was sent to, but who actually did the approval. So we know because it shows on the screen all that is in the IPA database and it's audited correctly.
Mm-hmm. Great.
All right, let's talk about some things that we can do with workflow routing. So most organizations that implement requisition approval, they're really focused on approving supplies, right? That's the 80 to 90% of requisitions by volume are just regular supply requisitions. And that's what probably your rec approval workflow is geared towards. But we've had some pretty good success bringing in additional requisition types and building some logic that handles the approval for those types of requisitions. Capital is an example. A lot of organizations are doing capital requisitioning outside of the loss and requisitioning process. We've been able to extend regular requisitioning, RQC, rec approvals into that capital rec segment. Some of the techniques we've used to help with that is we've incorporated document imaging. With capital recs, oftentimes there's backup documentation that needs to go along with that request. So just like you would tie into an imaging system for AP invoices, we can do the same with requisitioning. We've got different rules around service, or in healthcare, some of the healthcare specific requisition types. How does our flow know what kind of rec this is, and how does it know it needs to adjust or change the logic it's going to use for approval based on the type of requisition? Well, there's a handful of fields that you could make use of to help track that. One thing we've used is PO code.
And a lot of the time it's because those already exist. So you already have some sort of separation to separate the supplies from the capital from the services.
Yeah. So we could ask our approvers we could ask our requesters that when they're creating one of these recs in RQC under the profile section, there is an option to choose or enter the PO code.
And another thing to mention is the time differences, right? Because the work units are in UTC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So with the Landmark platform, Infor realized that not all customers are in the central time zone, and they've actually made the database run on UTC, and then the application will present local times to you. So as a developer or as a report person, you need to keep that in mind, that all of the date stamps that you're getting out of the database are in UTC time.
What does UTC stand?
Universal Coordinated Time, but the letters are backwards because it's French.
Is it French time? Does it line up with that time?
No, French is +1. France is +1, I think, Central European
time. So it's
time.
like the Greenwich or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Little geography lesson for you there.
They can't hear me, so.
Okay, extras. What else? What else can we share? One technique that I use now when I create an approval flow is I want to look at minimizing the number of user action nodes in my design. The classic way for creating a 6-level requisition approval flow is to lay out your flow with 6 user action nodes, 1 for each level of approval. That was how it was done in earlier versions of process flow. Now, with IPA, you've got the ability to use variables to hold user or task assignment in the user action node. So there's no need to duplicate out your code so many times in an approval flow. I look to make use of loops, reuse rather than repeat. We talked a little bit about escalation earlier. Definitely a lot more that you can do with that, because rather than being stuck in a single user action node where in process flow that would often lead to an occasion where the same approver had to double approve a rec. If a rec was escalated up one level, and the next higher level approval came in, did that approval, but then it only tracked as the previous level's approval, they might get that same rec again immediately. We don't see that over on IPA, using a more modern design. The death of the display exec. You're all probably familiar with recsum.htm. So that still exists over on the IPA side, but it's not the only option for displaying requisition details in the in basket. With IPA, if you take a look at the properties of your user action node under the display tab, you'll see there are a lot of different choices. Check the Landmark Info Center documentation. This is pretty well documented, but what I like to use now, because I'm already building up a very complete email notification with cool HTML tables that I'm going to send the approver, I'll use that same content and insert that into this display dynamically through the user action node rather than having a standalone HTML page. And then finally, mobile apps, again, something we touched on in our 10 favorite things about 10 presentation. Take a look at the mobile notifications app. It really doesn't take any server-side implementation to use. You might be surprised to find that if you have Landmark and IPA in your organization today, go into the App Store, if on your iPhone, or find a friend who has an iPhone, because it's iPhone only at the moment. Grab the mobile notifications app. The only thing you need to enter in is the URL to your Landmark server, and then a username and password, and it'll bring up your it'll bring up a list of items that are currently waiting for your approval, provided your iDevice is on corporate Wi-Fi, because of course you need network connectivity back to the Landmark server for that to work.
Yeah, so definitely something to look into. We find it can be overwhelming at the start, but if you are trying to implement these email approvals, the first question that's asked is, can I do this on my phone, right? Mm-hmm. So knowing that that's out there is definitely something to check out.
Got some questions over here.
All right.
Let's take a little a break here for some questions. So just confirming, you are able to approve a requisition from a mobile device, iPad, or any tab device with email.
Yeah, as long as that, you need the network connectivity from that device to your Landmark server. But yes, you can.
I think that was more of a question of if you have email pulled
the
up.
email approval. Yeah, that still works, because within that email, it's really just a hyperlink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just verifying. Okay.
So you just have to be on the network.
You just need to be on the network.
Yeah.
Okay, so next. Have you been able to customize an email approval in such a way that a user would receive an outstanding list of open requisitions with the approve reject buttons to the right of each requisition, not at the bottom on only one? In other words, add user action node and pass in which work unit to take action against, perhaps 2 days after the work unit was created.
Interesting.
I haven't tried it. The approve link is somewhat encrypted. I think if we knew the encryption routine and had the ability to generate those encrypted URLs knowing a work unit number, then yeah, we could do that.
We just have to hack it, basically.
Yeah, we just need to hack it.
I wanted to use that word. Makes me feel techy.
Yeah.
Next one. This is a comment, I think. We have rec approval. We have the work unit messaging, populating comments to display on requisition internal documents, so you can see this on RQ44 rec number, drill around to the comments.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Okay.
Yeah.
One comment did not find mobile notifications on App Store. I don't know, is that what we're
I think it's called Infor notifications.
Infor notifications?
Search for apps from Infor and it should be there. I've got it. It's real.
It's real, yeah. Some things may be figments of Stout's imagination.
No,
all right,
it's really here.
Okay, so we figured that out. The in-basket link you showed earlier in the email notification went directly to the actual individual unit, individual work unit itself? Question mark?
So the buttons?
Sorry?
Yeah.
Can you
Did
repeat that?
the in-basket link you showed earlier in the email notification?
Oh, no. No, it doesn't. Sorry.
Take out what's going on.
So if the approve link, if you have the buttons for approve and reject in your email, if you click that link, it's going to immediately take that action. It's not going to bring you to the in-basket and show you that item. And in fact, I don't have a way to give you a link that brings you to the in-basket and you're already positioned on that particular item. I can put an in-basket link, but it's going to basically bring you to the list where it shows all the items that are currently waiting your approval. If anybody's cracked that code, send it to me.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
I think we're good for now. Thank you, guys.
Great. Well,
great questions and comments.
Great. Wrapping up here, maybe you'd like to share why we've included this slide at the end of our presentation.
Sure. So this is our shout out here to folks working very hard behind the scenes, Mr. Logan Miller, Mr. Bill Getty, who are trying to expand RPI's social media presence. This lets us more actively participate in the Lawson community. I look at some of our colleagues in the community that attend these, and definitely there's a good dynamic of exchange that goes on. And so we try to enhance that, and we have a presence in these various things. The tricky ones on the upper right are Snapchat, which I'm not totally sure what that is, but we have Instagram, which we have a thing on that we apparently post to. And Digital Concourse, I know we're trying to have a nice presence on Digital Concourse as well and start sharing some content there. And our target is to expand on these webinars and start putting out other content. We're building out a blog and so forth. And we find that the content-driven information has been well received, and we plan to do a lot more of it. So if you guys can help us build that community up, we really appreciate it, and we appreciate your comments as well.
Great. Thank you. Are there any further questions?
I would give it a second. There's a Do you plan to post any sample code? What you put in the demo?
I wasn't planning on it. Email me. Email me what it is you're looking for, and if I have something handy, I'll pass it on.
Good question.
We had a client once that asked us to help him with some code, and basically he was able to take the code and use it very effectively. And his name's Chad Tucker, and now he works with us. So
yeah,
always looking for talent too. So okay, so we have no more questions, and I think it's time to wrap it up. I want to thank Stout and Mrs. Stephanie Kowal for this great presentation. We hope you enjoyed it. Appreciate the time you spent with us. Hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.